Saudações de Nova Democracia a todos os nossos espectadores e ouvintes. Boa noite, eu me chamo Ana Nascimento, sou jornalista aqui do jornal A Nova Democracia e comentarista política do programa A Propósito. No nosso programa de hoje, nós transmitiremos para vocês a entrevista que nós fizemos no último domingo, dia 5 de novembro, com o ativista, professor e sociólogo Bahar Hilu, que é um palestino nascido e criado na cidade de Belém, na Cisjordânia ocupada, e ele traz para a gente, no nosso programa de hoje, alguns relatos sobre como a situação está se desenvolvendo lá na Palestina. E antes da gente transmitir a nossa entrevista para vocês, a gente gostaria de ressaltar aqui a importância de você apoiar o jornal A Nova Democracia, a tribuna popular e democrática a serviço das massas populares do nosso país e do mundo. Vocês aí de casa devem ter percebido que no último mês a gente acompanhou de maneira ininterrupta todo o desenrolar da guerra que ocorre agora na Palestina. E não poderia ser diferente. A guerra que se desenrola agora na Palestina, a luta de libertação nacional do povo palestino, bem como as lutas de libertação nacional em todo o mundo, elas são muito caras para o jornal A Nova Democracia, são uma matéria muito importante para nós. E devido a esse acompanhamento, quase que 24 horas por dia, nós estamos tendo muitas despesas, muitos custos, e nós precisamos da ajuda de vocês para que a gente consiga sempre entregar em melhor qualidade, no mais alto nível, aquilo que as massas populares do mundo inteiro e do nosso país demandam. Então, se você apoia o nosso trabalho, apoia a cobertura que nós estamos fazendo aqui no Jornal Nova Democracia, apoia a luta e a causa do povo palestino, bem como a luta do nosso povo também, apoia o nosso jornal. Afinal de contas, nós surgimos há mais de 20 anos servindo as massas de todo o coração, no intuito único e exclusivo de transmitir as denúncias que as massas trazem para nós, de mostrar as lutas que elas têm desenvolvido no nosso país e no mundo também. Então, o jornal Nova Democracia só existe porque essas massas têm lutado. Então, se você apoia a nossa luta, não esqueça de assinar o nosso Catarse, de deixar um superchat ou de deixar também um Pix. A gente está com uma meta para finalizar, a gente está com uma meta de comprar um novo computador, que é um equipamento caro, computadores são caros, e a nossa meta é conquistar R$5.000. Ajude a gente a bater essa meta para que a gente consiga resolver os problemas técnicos que têm aparecido aqui na nossa live, devido ao nosso esforço de sempre entregar aí o melhor conteúdo para vocês. Greetings from New Democracy. I am Ana Nascimento, and today we are interviewing Bahar Hilu, a Palestinian born and raised in the town of Bethlehem in Palestine. He's a sociologist, educator, and an activist. Hello, Bahar Hilu. How are you doing?
Hello, Anna. I'm surviving. Thanks for asking. I hope you and your audience are having a good day.
Could you tell us how it is to live under Zionist occupation?
This is a multi-layered question. Like you survive oppression and atrocities and apartheid with the means that you have. The Israeli oppressor, or let's say my oppressor, is in control of almost every aspect of life in terms of movement, in terms of what kind of places you are designated for you to move into and move out of, and where you're not allowed to go, where you're allowed to go, and so on and so forth. And in a way, like similar to the state control over its own population. They control how much water you are allowed to drink or not allowed to drink. They control airspace and like everything below the land. So how do you survive? You survive by looking at like what kind of means you have. we survive Israeli oppression in the same way like any other oppressed populations survived. So some of us survive with denial, some of us survive with rejection. We behave like survivors of any kind of atrocities. You find the extreme examples of our survival are Palestinians who are sellouts, or Palestinians who have no sense of their identity, who end up serving the oppressor. It's like what Malcolm X would call the house Negro. We have those Palestinians, and then on the other extreme, you have Palestinians who are willing to sacrifice their lives and carry arms to fight the Israeli oppressors on their way towards liberty and freedom, and everyone in between. So how do survivors behave? Survivors behave based on what they have in their disposal in terms of like material and mental elements, let's say. So a lot of us are aware of what we are surviving. That's what I would say, like very different from any other oppressed population, is that we are aware of the savagery and brutality of our oppressor, and we are aware of the fact that we have to continue to survive regardless.
And we are aware that many people are being arrested in Palestine, occupied Palestine. Do you know where are these people being taken to, how they are right now?
Okay. Only like in Israeli military courts. Israeli military courts over the past 50 plus years have produced more than 1 million sentences against Palestinian residents of the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip. The State of Israel have like prisons set up primarily for Palestinian residents of the West Bank and Gaza. For the past 30 days, since Israel launched a new form of genocide upon Palestinians in Gaza, they have been like arresting each and every Palestinian they can get their hands on, not only on the occupied West Bank, but also in Jerusalem. Also Palestinian survivors of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, or the so-called Israeli Arabs. Hundreds upon hundreds of those Palestinians are being arrested for voicing concerns about Israel's savagery and genocide in Gaza, or for trying to like empower, just make a Facebook statement trying to say like what is happening is wrong. That would be enough to get like the Israeli Secret Service and the Israeli police to come and arrest you. On the occupied West Bank alone, over the past 30 days, the State of Israel have arrested more than 2,000 Palestinian residents of the West Bank. The reason they increase the arrests of Palestinians is, first of all, because they can. And second of all, Palestinian militants who kidnapped different Israeli soldiers and settlers on October 7th. They did so because they know that Palestinians who are in prison will not be allowed to come out of Israeli jails without a military swap, especially those who are sentenced for like ridiculous amount of times. Like there's one Palestinian who's sentenced for like 4,600 years. So it's, the State of Israel can sentence those people. Also, we have a lot of Palestinians who were murdered by Israeli authorities, and their bodies are still in morgues or buried away from their families and so on and so forth. So, but the only way to get those people out is through prisoners exchange. So the State of Israel have been like loading its prisons with Palestinians for the past 30 days. in preparation for a possible like prisoner swap in the future. But why do they do that? They do that because they can, and they've been arresting people, they've been murdering people. More than 350 Palestinians were murdered by Israeli authorities since the beginning of the year. Nearly half of them were murdered over the past 30 days. But like you, and rightly so, like you don't hear about those things because our attention have to always be fixed at the genocide that is being carried out by Israeli criminals in Gaza.
And about the Israeli settlers that were armed by the Zionist minister Ben-Gvir, how Palestinian people in the occupied West Bank are dealing with it and are defending themselves from the attacks?
You're not allowed to defend yourself there. If you defend yourself from settler attack, you will be accused of attacking a settler, and therefore you'll be arrested and locked up in jail. There's no way on earth a Palestinian is allowed to protect or defend himself from Israeli savagery and from Israeli criminal behavior. Now, there's a misunderstanding with all this Ben-Gvir militarizing settlers. Like, according to Israeli military rules, any Israeli civilian in the occupied West Bank has to move around with their gun on them at all times. This is not something new. Every Israeli individual that serves in the Israeli army ends up being given like 2 pieces of weapons, you know? So Ben-Gvir gave them a 3rd piece of weapons. How are they behaving? The language that some of those 800,000 settlers that live in the occupied West Bank, the language they use is genocidal language. They look at this as like, oh, let's seize the moment. All the attention is towards Gaza. Let's just like start like beating up and murdering like as many Palestinians as we can get our hands off. One mentally disabled Palestinian was murdered by settlers and soldiers yesterday. There was another Palestinian that was shot in the chest by an Israeli settler during the olive harvest. He was with his family on their land doing the olive harvest, and then boom, a bunch of like savages came in and murdered them. Like, what is happening is a process of lynching, but instead of using ropes, they use bullets. And they're seizing the moment. Like, those people are not doing anything different from what their government is doing. And in fact, like many of them like honor the legacy of the founders of the state of Israel and Palestine by murdering as many Palestinians as they can. They're seizing the moment here.
That's a horrifying situation. And about the communication between the occupied West Bank and the Gaza Strip, how are you receiving the news?
Oh, the news, there are like the state of Israel murdered about 30 of the journalists who operate on the ground. Like, if they could not murder a journalist, they would go after their families. So many journalists like ended up being punished for being journalists from the ground, you know. The state of Israel have got supply for electricity, water, and internet, medicine, food, everything. Everything is just being cut from the prison that we call Gaza. How can the state of Israel cut all the supplies? It's simply because they're in control of them. How do we communicate across the board and through Israeli destruction of electricity, water, and internet? There are very, very, very few attempts of using like whatever kind of technology found in different places in Gaza, like solar panels, for example.
Yes.
The state of Israel goes on destroying like solar panels that generate electricity because literally they want people in Gaza to starve to death. They want them to die of thirst. Like, why else? Like this morning, one of the Israeli airstrikes targeted like a water cistern. Like, the reason you destroy a water resource is because you do not want people to drink water, and therefore you want them to die of thirst. The reason you bomb a bakery, like the state of Israel destroyed more than 20 bakeries over the past 30 days. Like, the reason you do that is because you want to murder people. The reason you destroy more than 20 hospitals, the only like hospital that operates for like cancer patients, there's more than 10,000 Palestinian cancer patients who are not dead yet. So they have one of two options. They either die because of the tumor eating them from within, or they die because of the tumor that has been bombing them out of existence. Like every aspect of everything that the state of Israel would see as like something that is useful for any of the civilians and they can bomb it out of existence, they do that. It doesn't matter if it's a house, it's a market, it's a cafe, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, anything that is useful for human survival in Gaza is being bombed out of existence. So how we communicate? We communicate through the remaining journalists on the ground, and we communicate by being in touch with whoever from our contacts like can respond. Like only 1 out of 6 friends that I have locked up in Gaza now, only one sends a sign of life out. The other, we don't know if they are still under the rubble of their homes or like their names were not documented. Because right now there's 9,700 Palestinians that were murdered over the past 30 days because of Israel's bombardment. Many of them are anonymous. Like there was no way to identify those ones. Like, there were many that were blown up into pieces that there's no way to confirm their identity or identify them. There's more than 2,500 Palestinians remaining under the rubbles of their homes. Gaza now, only one sends a sign of life out. The other, we don't know if they are still under the rubble of their homes or like their names were not documented. Because right now there's 9,700 Palestinians that were murdered over the past 30 days because of Israel's bombardment. Many of them are anonymous. Like, there was no way to identify those ones. Like, there were many that were blown up into pieces that there's no way to confirm their identity or identify them. There's more than 2,500 Palestinians remaining under the rubbles of their homes. What's happening is, like, you are communicating with people who are in the process of being murdered by the state of Israel.
West Bank, we are seeing and we are aware about many protests, demonstrations take the streets in Ramallah, Jenin, Bethlehem, Hebron. We are seeing masses and masses of Palestinian people protesting and fighting the Zionist occupation. And we are dying to know how are the resistance carrying out these responses to the Zionist occupation, to the Zionist state of Israel. And we are seeing many young people confronting the Zionist soldiers in Jenin camp. And if you could talk about this.
Okay. When it comes to militant resistance, there are a few Palestinian individuals who have the capacity in the occupied West Bank to the tools of violent resistance. Because like the situation in the occupied West Bank is like any kind of resistance to the Israeli oppressor violates the rules made up by the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. So if you are a Palestinian who wants to join militant resistance to Israeli oppression, then the first obstacle you have to be concerned about is the Palestinian Authority, because the Palestinian Authority exists in order to maintain stability under oppression. It also exists in order to rule Palestinians under oppression, even though like they are Palestinians, of course. So the witnessing the genocide going on in Gaza, like literally put us back in a point where like the only way like to deal with this oppressor is through violence, because non-violence doesn't work with them. They bully non-violent activists and so on. So individuals here and there would carry out like attacks on very well guarded Israeli targets. Also, if the Israeli army knows in a way or another that there is a person with a gun, then they will send like 10, 20 military vehicles to arrest and kill that person. Like today, there was like one person in a neighborhood in Jerusalem that was surrounded. Like he was like the Israelis found out where he was. Like they sent like this huge unit to surround his house, and they murdered the man. And they even like took his body out in a bulldozer as a show of heroism. It's like literally having like 100 people like beating the shit of one person, and then all of them feeling like heroes. You know, that's what's happening in the West Bank. Well, what's happening in Gaza is a little bit more established. Like in Gaza, the Palestinians who continue to be murdered there, many of those who have been surviving Israeli criminal behavior towards Gaza over the past 70 plus years, they know that we're dealing with a savage, merciless, racist regime. And we need to figure out ways to hurt this savage regime. How to hurt them? Like the biggest thing the Israelis brag about is their army. So you hurt them by destroying their army vehicles and by, attacking their army and so on and so forth. On the other side, what the state of Israel have perfected over the past 70 plus years is massacring Palestinian civilians. Like our history is full of blood on the hands of Israeli criminals. From December of 1947, from even 6 months before the state of Israel was established in Palestine, we had some of those savages that the British called terrorists at the time. Some of those savages were massacring Palestinians right, left, and center. So what the State of Israel have excelled in is murdering Palestinian civilians, Palestinian survivors of Israeli oppression. That's what they were excelled in. Were with a very limited resources, with a siege that was carried out upon the Palestinians in Gaza over the past 17 years, control of everything on the land and above the land, but not below the land. So you have Palestinians who are willing to carry the weapon and sacrifice their life for the freedom of Palestinians from the apartheid regime. They operate more like the ANC. Now, the thing that has turned to be a problem for the white man or for the Western world or for whatever is how do those Palestinians, have a military resistance or a militant resistance that could stand against the largest army in the region. We're not talking about Ukraine here. We are talking about a concentration camp that has been operating for the past 75 years. So what do you expect from a concentration camp? Tools of resistance that are very, very, very basic and primitive. Not tools of resistance that are going to destroy a $9 million tank or $13 million military carrier, So on a military level, the State of Israel is not able to defeat the military wing of the Islamic resistance movement. By the way, many people look at the Islamic resistance movement as if Islamic blah blah blah. The majority of Palestinian people in this society, the majority of them identify with Islamic faith. If we were Catholics, people will call it the Catholic resistance movement. But people are identify with the Muslim faith, so they invent the Islamic resistance movement. It's a form of liberation theology that is very, very well known in America Latina, but I don't know. It's not even acceptable to describe a Palestinian resistance movement as a form of liberation theology, So the military resistance in Gaza is much, much more established and much stronger than Palestinian resistance in the occupied West Bank for logistic purposes, not because we're different people. There's no moment of stability in the occupied West Bank where you can just even think of organizing any form of an underground cell or whatever. That is this kind of impossible in the occupied West Bank.
And the situation developed in Palestine and occupied West Bank, Palestine in general. It's about a struggle of national freedom of a people who a national.
Listen, the point, let's go back to the point. The founders of the State of Israel expelled families from nearly 531 communities, and they wanted those families to disappear. So they didn't have enough bullets to eliminate everyone, so they went for a different strategy, which is massacring residents of certain villages and getting people in the nearby villages to escape. It's pretty much like how ISIS succeeded in terrorizing millions of Syrians over the past 10 years or 12 years. So it's normal. Like, you go to a community, you commit atrocities, you bring the TV, you bring the newspapers, journalists, communicate that atrocity, so the people in nearby community will hear it, so they will not wait for their turn. They will escape. So over a period of 20 months, that's what the founders of the State of Israel have turned Palestine into. Now, the first generation of Palestinian families that were expelled from their homes and properties, that generation was highly traumatized. Did not understand. My grandmother died not understanding what hit her and her family back in 1940, in the summer of 1948. That's the root cause for everything. You robbed families of their land and property. You expelled families from their communities. Gaza alone has families that were expelled from 240 communities. Mm-hmm. Now, what we see is that resistance to, or rejection to, that form of robbery. So how do I expect rejection to robbery? Some of us reject it with their hands, some of us reject it with their hearts. Many of us don't even reject it. The president of the Palestinian Authority was 14 years old when he was expelled from his family's town or city in the north of Palestine. He's one of the people who were I might go there to visit. He's a person who got over the robbery carried out by the founders of the State of Israel. The rest of Palestinian families are not going to do that. The State of Israel, instead of communicating, robbing the Palestinian society of their land and property, they just made some stuff up about, they hate us because we are Jewish. They reject us because we are white. They don't like us. No. The rejection of the State of Israel is based on rejecting robbery. It's not based on I don't care who comes and steal my grandparents' land. I don't care. They can call themselves Buddhist. They can call themselves whatever they want. But I'm not going to accept that my inheritance have been stolen.
Yes.
And they make it up about this is some kind of a cultural or ideological or all that kind of crap that is actually have nothing to do with reality. Israelis who were murdered on the 7th of October, they were not murdered because they were Jewish. They were murdered because they are beneficiaries of stolen goods. So I'm not saying that you should go and murder every single beneficiary of Israeli criminal behavior. I'm not saying that, but claiming that the root cause for this problem is ideological or religious, or that's crap. That's that kind of analysis that only buys time for Israeli savages to continue controlling Palestine. But it's not a realistic analysis. It's not ideological. That's what I mean.
We are seeing around the world many movements of support for Palestinian people, and these demonstrations are getting more violent, more massive, more massive each day. And here in Brazil, we appreciate so much the struggle, the fight of the Palestinian people. We would like to know how people in West Bank, occupied West Bank, are mobilizing themselves or gathering themselves to make these demonstrations, to fight, to show support for your brothers and sisters in Gaza. And if you could
Not
talk.
brothers and sisters, it's us. Like
Yes.
the Palestinian population on the planet is like 15 million people. 2.2 million of us are locked up in that concentration camp. So it's not like it's not like we are from a different society. We're the same society that have been fragmented and dispossessed and destroyed over the past, surviving attempts of its destruction for the past 75 years. How do people mobilize? Like you have school kids in school in the classrooms, like let's go out and protest. Like anybody with a TV, anybody with a mobile phone, anybody that actually looks at what's happening, we know we don't have the power to stop it. We're subject to it, but silence is not an option. We have to
Yes.
express our rejection to what's going on. So it's almost on every different level, on the level of schools, and the level of universities, and the level of like just people in society. Like what can we do? Like we have to take to the streets. So you do what you can over here. The protests around the world reaffirm to each and every participant of those protests that they do believe in the fact that everyone is born free and equal, and they do recognize that what prevents that equality from happening is the state of Israel. You don't have to be a pro-Palestinian to see that Israel is a savage apartheid regime.
Yes.
You don't have to be that. All what you need to do to be is like a decent person who believes that everyone is born free and equal. What does it mean to us? What it means to us is that, oh wow, like we're being murdered and oppressed while other people are watching. Those protests, like once again, it's amazing that people come out to the street to protest Israeli criminal behavior. It's also amazing that it's not violent. It's in the best interest of the state of Israel is to turn those protests into violent actions. And like I've seen some protests that were like fistfights was going on initiated by defenders and supporters of the state of Israel. Like if I'm a defender or a supporter of a criminal regime like the state of Israel, and I hear that the victims of my savage and racist conduct are going to protest in a street, like why the hell would I go to that street? Unless like I really want to provoke and show some action, show 1,000 people beating the hell out of like a small group of people, and that image actually works, because it doesn't matter. Like what you need is like one defender of Israeli apartheid and Israeli criminal behavior to be attacked by 10 like people who are so desperate for this genocide to stop. And then you can turn the story around and you can say like Jew haters attacked a poor Israeli person in the streets of this or that. And then you have that story. Like PR and propaganda is like you can see the legacy of propaganda, of Israeli propaganda, like throughout the coverage of the past 75 years. In what world is the state of Israel a democracy other than in an imaginary world? In what world is the state of Israel anything but an apartheid regime other than in an imaginary world? But there's a lot of people who live in those imaginary worlds. The other problem I see with protests, and like I really want to be honest with all those who stand in support for peace and justice in Palestine. My oppressor has an office in your country. That office is not a public space. That office is not the presidential palace. That office is not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That office is not any of the places where you go for a protest.
Yes.
That office is called the Israeli embassy. You know? So like when you want to protest against Israeli genocide and Israeli criminal behavior, that is the office you go to. Not in the streets. You know, not in the somewhere like I'm not being bombed out of existence by the streets around the White House. I'm being bombed out of existence by the State of Israel. And the State of Israel has an office in your country, and you have the responsibility to shut down that office and expel the defender of Israeli apartheid who occupies it. Governments are not going to expel Israeli criminals. Governments are not going to impose sanctions on this apartheid regime. The people will, and the people should, and the people must. I'm not making this stuff up. Back in November 1984, a large number of anti-apartheid Americans decided to protest outside the embassy of apartheid South Africa, day in, day out. What they did back then was deemed illegal. So after 9,000 arrests and after 13 months of sit-ins and protests, day in, day out for 13 months, the embassy of apartheid South Africa was shut down. The State of Israel is not more important to the Western world than apartheid South Africa was. You know, in the end of the day, like the State of Israel is useful for the military industry of the Western powers or the superpowers, but it doesn't have resources like uranium or gold or diamond or even tea. You know, so it's much easier to actually deal with this apartheid regime than how activists and anti-apartheid activists around the world dealt with the previous apartheid regime in the south of Africa. So yes, we will be murdered continuously by this criminal regime, but currently we are being murdered with complicity of the Brazilian government. Once the Israeli embassy is shut down, like it was carried out in Colombia, Bolivia, Venezuela, Chile, you know. So we need, you know, Brazil to unfortunately to follow. Because like for so long, like Brazil was followed in the struggle for social justice, but they're too late now. They're too late, and better late than never. You know. In a previous interview, I was like talking about like, you know, I would understand like why a fascist like Bolsonaro would maintain relations with the State of Israel during this genocide. Right? I understand that, but I do not understand why Lula is behaving like a Bolsonaro. I don't understand that, you know? And I don't want anybody in Brazil to explain it to me, and I don't want anybody to understand it, you know? That makes no sense. So the problem is not, we need those protests to move on, but we need to relocate and go to the exact address of the Israeli oppressor in every city and in every country. That's if we want to be effective. But if we just want to express our despair and we want to express our outrage and anger about the butchery of the Palestinian people, the butchery of the Palestinian people did not start in October 7th. It's just another milestone. So yeah, I see protests around the world. I see how people mobilize outside. I see how people mobilize here. And here it's, you know, here we don't go protesting in public spaces. Here, we go to the address of the oppressor, which is the Israeli wall, the Israeli checkpoint, the Israeli military vehicle, the Israeli this or the Israeli that. Like, the addresses of my oppressor over here are plenty. So when I want to protest Israeli criminal behavior, I know where to go.
Yes.
You have one address for my oppressor in Brazil, and nobody is allowed to get there.
That's a very powerful message you deliver to us here in Brazil. And
here it's meaningless if it was not taken. So it's not a powerful message, it's a realistic. I'm a very realistic,
yes.
pragmatic person. So I see all those human resources and I feel like, oh my God, only if they have an address and a plan. And it will be like one of the most beautiful protests, you know? There's another thing, like people should also understand that Israeli criminal behavior will continue as long as governments around the world provide the Israeli oppressor with diplomatic, economic, and military support, and at the same time provide Palestinians with lip service and humanitarian aid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't matter if it's Lula or Bolsonaro in this case. Both of them maintained diplomatic relations with the State of Israel and provided recognition and lip service to the Palestinians. When you support two sides of the same oppression, you maintain oppression.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what Lula is involved in. That's what he's doing. And I don't care about intentions. I don't care about justifications. You know, what I care about is the outcomes of your behavior, the outcome of your conduct. And the outcome of the conduct of the government of Brazil is to maintain this. A third point, if I may explain, is that I've never heard any, even the most fascist leaders around the world, like not even Trump said it, that I support the State of Israel because it oppresses Palestinians and is eliminating them out of existence. Actually, they do something much worse than this.
Yes.
They provide the State of Israel with support despite of its criminal behavior towards Palestinians. And you know, like, I have respect for people who actually support my oppressor because it's going around and kill me. I have no understanding for those who claim to be my friends and at the same time support my oppressor despite of its oppression. You know, the position is actually much more disgusting than what we might think or assume. So we need to stop Israel's support of the State of Israel despite of Israel's genocide against Palestinians or misbehavior towards Palestinians. This regime is finally showing a very, 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 very clear face. The difference between the savagery committed now and the savagery committed 75 years ago is that 75 years ago, it was not televised. Now every bomb is televised, every bomb is recorded, every person below those bombs is documented. The founders of the State of Israel murdered 15,000 of us over a period of 20 months. We barely have any documentation. We feel proud that we have the names. Now we have the name and the picture. So yeah, like the savagery of the State of Israel is nothing you can hide anymore. You can defend it, like what the white man is doing now. You can defend it, but you can say, "Oh, it didn't happen."
Mm-hmm.
But you can defend it. Like I do understand like why racist people like do this. They have played it on us, like, oh my God, why we can't stand like seeing people like us being killed in Ukraine. Yeah, but you enjoy seeing the blood of brown and black people. So yeah. Anyways, I don't have short answers, Anne.
And one thing that connects us here in Brazil, in favelas, in Rio, is that the occupation vehicles, the bulldozers, they are here in Brazil too. The Brazilian government imported the Israeli vehicles to fight people in favelas. And
ask Jelma about it. Ask Lula about it. Ask Bolsonaro about
exactly.
it. Like the military exchange between Brazil and this rogue regime or this criminal regime is in billions. It's in billions because that's what the state of Israel exports to the world. The state of Israel biggest export to the world is its weaponry and spyware and so on. One of the things that drove the Israelis mad about the 7th of October is that their pride about their spying abilities, about intelligence, about monitoring or surveillance, military equipment, and so on, like all of it was destroyed within 30 minutes to an hour. Like, not many people will believe like an Israeli salesman about how effective like their weapons are. So the state of Israel is effective when it comes to American-made fighting jets.
Yes.
But those fighting jets were not, produced by the state of Israel. They don't even know how to build one because they are not allowed by the Americans to build any, But like everything about their pride, like their tanks were destroyed, their military carriers were destroyed, like, so they won't have much to sell. But like the connection between the violence of law enforcement in Brazil and the violence carried out by the state of Israel is huge. It's very well documented as well.
Yes. And what's happening in Palestine right now is something that always happened in a much more let me see, in a scale much more.
This is why, like, most of us are not shocked. Maybe we're shocked by the level because somewhere in us, we assumed that you can be so evil, but you won't blow up a hospital. You can be so evil, but you will not blow up a kindergarten or a nursery school. You can be so evil, but you can be so evil, period. You can be so genocidal, period. You can be a savage, period. That's like for many of Palestinians who think like, no, this is unbelievable. Like, in the end of the day, Israeli soldiers and Israeli executives are human beings. Like, yeah, they are. Hitler was a human being. So what? They are evil human beings. Like, they are human beings who commit atrocities and accuse the people on the receiving end of those atrocities of being the reason for it. I don't know if you see enough images, but like you probably saw like the image when with the exchange between this Israeli prisoner lady who was released and one of the militants in that were like kidnapping her. They shook hands and left. You know, that was promoted as a barbaric behavior, as a savage behavior, as like a propaganda behavior. It's like no, that's genuine behavior. On the other side, I saw like this morning videos of an Israeli military carrier dragging a body of a Palestinian behind it. And that's a civilized behavior. We are being accused of all the savagery that we have been subject to over the past 75 years. And who accuses us of it? Our oppressor.
The Zionist oppression your people feel and suffer from. Many people around the world, and even the Palestinian people, are calling it the new Nazism.
Listen, the only reason people do not compare researchers and dominant human rights organizations, main universities, and main researchers, and so on. The only reason those people do not do comparative studies of the behavior of social nationalists in Germany in the 30s and 40s and the behavior of social nationalists in the state of Israel today is only because it's made illegal. It's illegal to compare, racist behavior of the state of Israel with racist behavior of Germany. It's illegal. Because when you do that comparison, you make Germany look like Israel, or you make Israel look like Germany, and both of them want to get away. Both of them want to get away from the atrocities of the Holocaust. So the only reason, it's not because it doesn't exist. Listen, do you want to know how sick that is? There's a very, very easy test, to help you understand how sick and disgusting what the state of Israel is doing. All what you need to do is to imagine. If you are a person who believes that everyone is born free and equal, then you can imagine much easier than anybody else. Imagine that every Palestinian that lives in Gaza is actually Jewish, because there are many Palestinian Jews. So can you imagine what would we call a space that is 350 square kilometers where 2.3 million Jewish people are locked up and being bombed out of existence every now and then when something similar to the Warsaw Ghetto uprising happens, we bomb them out of existence. Everyone is held responsible, from those who were pre-born to those who were supposed to die because of cancer or because of things that they are not allowed to get treatment for. What if they were Jewish? We will not be having a conversation about whether the Gaza concentration camp is a concentration camp or not.
Exactly.
It's like how can you get a person to understand patriarchy? Just ask the male, hey, would you like to be treated like a woman? They will say no. Why? Because deep in their brains, they will be like, oh, men have male privilege, women don't. Okay, thank you. Now you got patriarchy. Or you're in the process of getting it. Same thing. If those Palestinians were born to Jewish families, the behavior will be a little bit similar, but we will use a different language. The Western world doesn't care for Jews and doesn't care for Palestinians. It only cares for power. I do not believe any white politician that comes around and say like, it's too bad that Palestinians have to survive in this way or to be killed or whatever, but the state of Israel has a right to defend itself. Yeah. You don't care. So you heard this line that Israel has a right to defend itself? Anna? Did you hear the line that Israel has a right to defend itself? Do you hear that?
Yes, and that's outrageous.
No, it's not outrageous. It's outrageous because we don't understand that every criminal has a right to defend himself. Like in many countries, like if a criminal is arrested, the police tells him, like, if you can't afford a lawyer, a defender, we will hire one for you. So like every criminal has a right to defend itself. Like the state of Israel as a criminal regime, as a savage regime, has the right of other criminals, which is the right to defend itself. You know, but the right to defend yourself does not mean to go after people and murder them and bomb them out of existence. You know, but like, yeah, okay. All criminals do have a right to defend themselves. All criminals do. And the state of Israel is not a different criminal from any other criminal who's defending himself. The shitty thing is, sorry for my French, the thing is, like, we don't defend the state of Israel as a criminal regime. Because people do not, like those politicians do not even recognize Israeli apartheid as apartheid.
Yes.
Like you don't recognize that the globe is round. You know, what are you going to do then? So if you don't recognize the basics, then how are you going to help solving a problem? If you don't understand what the problem is.
And they say Israel has the right to defend itself
in the exact same way a pedophile, a criminal, a mafia member, a drugs dealer has a right to a lawyer.
But they don't
a rapist
see...
has a right to defend himself, right? Even a rapist has a right to a lawyer, you know? But then that lawyer the state of Israel has to defend itself in a prison cell. Not to be rewarded for its criminal behavior as we see today. When we take Israeli criminals to the International Criminal Court, they have a right to a lawyer.
But international laws are even being transpassed by the Israeli government.
Yeah.
And they are doing exactly nothing about it.
I wish they were doing nothing. Nothing means nothing. But what the international community is doing is a little bit more than nothing. They are supplying the state of Israel with tools of oppression.
Yes,
They're supplying the state of Israel with diplomatic, economic, and military means in order to maintain this apartheid and to maintain this oppression. That's worse than nothing.
Exactly.
I wish they were doing nothing.
Well, Palestinian people has the right, and more than right, to defend themselves from the aggression, from the atrocity, from the bombing, from everything Israel is doing right now, and with the support of the imperialism of the United States.
As survivors of oppression, we don't have collective or this or that right. Like the oppressed people resist oppression not because of international law. Oppressed people resist oppression because it's a duty. For so many people, the existence of injustice is an invitation for struggle. It's not an invitation for submission,
Exactly.
you know? So yeah, like oppressed people have a right to everything except for surviving oppression, like submission to oppression. We don't have the right to submit to oppression, you know? We have a right to continue to aspire for a better life away from this oppression.
It's a
But
duty.
anyways, you're familiar with blaming the victim kind of approach or norm, social norm. That's what's happening also, when it comes to Palestine. Like, obviously, Palestinians are the victims of Israeli oppression, and then we allow this language where we hold Palestinians equally responsible to their oppressor. That's stupid. That's stupid. That is full of, things that are ethically wrong there. No, you don't hold the victim responsible.
Exactly.
You don't. Whatever the victim does comes out from the fact of oppression. Palestinian violence is motivated by Israeli savagery and oppression. When Israeli savagery and oppression comes to an end, Palestinian violence will definitely come to an end.
Palestinian struggle is justified and will be justified by history.
History will tell.
Yes.
History will talk about this inspiring population the same way actually history talks about it. Like for 6,000 years, this geography was ruled by 23 different oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of our indigenous wisdom, we understand that the oppression is not sustainable on this land.
Exactly.
It's not sustainable. How it will come to an end, I don't know. Will it come to an end? Of course it will.
And I would like to make a final question to you. That is, what is your perspectives about the struggle being carried out by the resistance right now in Palestine? That are being aware of the support, the massive support around the world. Your struggle in Palestine are being taken by us in Brazil, in Mexico, even in the United States, around the entire world as our one struggle. And
okay, do you know why that is? Do you know why that is? Because all the governments you mentioned are involved in supporting my oppressor. You will not find like that many protests, like for against the Ukrainian war. Because Ukraine and Russia are two independent societies, two independent countries, two geographies, You'll just wish like the leaders will sit down together. It's like, okay, what are we fighting for? Let's just stop this crap. in here it's different. Like those governments are involved directly. Like Brazil has been involved in maintaining this struggle from the very beginning. Like Brazil is one of those of nearly 33 irresponsible, racist countries that voted in favor of the partition of Palestine. So they have been involved since November 29, 1947. All countries have been involved. Like our society was destroyed over a period of 15 minutes, which is the voting in the General Assembly in November 29 of 1947. So those countries are involved. The reason people are involved is because they see how their countries are involved, how they and their names, their tax dollar, like everything about them is involved. Also, they're involved because people from a very young age are educated that the state of Israel is an achievement of the 20th century. And then you wake up and you realize that, oh my God, I've been brainwashed and fooled into believing this crap. So like people are involved because people were brought in. People have been invested in order to be silent about Israeli oppression or to support Israeli oppression, or be proud of the government that supports Israeli criminal behavior. So like the struggle for Palestine is literally like a global struggle because so many corrupt people from different nationalities have been fooling their own societies to believe that my oppressor is somehow Jewish. Or my oppressor is anything but a social nationalist, or my oppressor is anything but a thief. So when you realize that, like you realize you've been fooled into believing something wrong. So what do you do? What do you do? Protest against it.
We are so thankful.
No, Gerada, like the honor is mine. Like to me, like I am in debt to Brazil because Brazil helped me a lot in trying to understand my reality. Like one of the most profound experiences I've ever had, besides Palestine, was Brazil. You know, so actually I was supposed to have another visit to Brazil, but then the only thing that prevented me was COVID. But yeah, we will see. Like the awareness you find in Brazil about the different struggles and people deciding to put their life aside and just go on to struggle against injustice when it comes to like people in favelas, colombolas, MST communities, like you know, there is like beautiful struggle happening everywhere. And it's like it is like in Brazil where I learned that like yes, oppression is an invitation for struggle.
Yes.
You know, that's where you find inspiration, where you find like community, that's where you find like social growth. When we struggle together for the betterness of everyone. Yeah. So okay, dear. Where are you guys located?
In Rio.
In Rio. Okay. Yes. I think you mentioned that. Sorry. When
You're
if I ever come back to Rio, like I'll probably do a similar thing in your studio. I will want to come visit it.
we would be so glad and happy to receive you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
dear.
much for giving us this statement of what you're dealing with in Palestine, in occupied West Bank, the struggle carried out by your people, and surely and honestly, we support and believe in the freedom of Palestinian people and the beautiful fight, beautiful and the strength of your people that are writing chapters in the history of humanity. So your struggle means a lot for us. We respect. It's a matter of importance for us. And we surely believe that Palestine will win this struggle. It's inevitable. Yes. Inevitable, exactly.
Yeah, Palestine will be free. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So, yeah, thank you so very much. I'll say obrigado.
Obrigado.
Obrigado for your time as well. And I hope this will be very, very helpful for your audience.
Surely will be. Thank you so much, Baha. Thank you so much. Bye.
Salam. Salam.
Salam.